Hi, and hope you're doing well. I thought I'd just briefly touch on something that I thought I'd never have to talk about, and but it seems like it's become a little bit of a thing, and that is sort of this defense of the right, and this idea that the right and the left can come together against the powers that be. That would be a nice idea if lots of different right-leaning or far-right circles didn't want to harm the left and didn't want to wipe out the left, as is evidenced by recent comments by, I'm assuming, a Christian nationalist, Christian in quotes, Michael Knowles at CPAC. I don't know what his religious leanings are, but his comments that trans people need to be eradicated, that was pretty much word for word what he said. There's a lot of right-wing people who have absolutely zero interest in protecting the rights of minority groups. Black people, LGBTIQ people, and so forth. They have zero interest in that. Now, it's a very windy day today, so I hope that this will make a difference. And so, because they have such little interest in the rights and welfare of minority groups, I happen to be a part of a minority group. I'm queer. I'm close to a lot of trans people. It's something that when I see people talking about, like Chris Hedges, for example, talking about, when he went along and he attended and spoke at the right-wing, quote-unquote, anti-war rally, along with some other ones who've gone off the rails, Max Blumenthal, Jackson Hinkle, not that he was ever really on the rails, but Jackson Hinkle, and some other ones that were there. There was probably only about 7% of the speakers there that hadn't in some way gone off the rails with kind of right-leaning narratives, or just, Jimmy Dore was there, another one that's gone off the rails. These people I don't consider left anymore, if they ever were. But anyway, Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize recipient, went along to that particular rally. Now, Chris Hedges, he often says, I'm not on social media, even though other people put him on social media all the time. He's everywhere on YouTube. He's everywhere all over the net. He just doesn't have accounts that he started up himself. However, being that he is everywhere on social media, he doesn't really have much idea of what people are doing on social media. I'm assuming he doesn't, because had he been following Max Blumenthal or Jimmy Dore or Jackson Hinkle and people like that, if he'd been and some people on Revolutionary Blackout and all of that, he would have seen some unfortunate takes on various things. One being, for example, Jimmy Dore defending Kyle Rittenhouse. Jimmy Dore had somebody on who was blatantly transphobic, and I've always thought Jimmy Dore was probably transphobic, or would go that way when it was convenient, and it seems like he's doing that. Now, I don't even really watch him, but somebody posted something that one of his guests had said, and he was sitting there, and I don't think he pushed back on that. So it's just sort of like it's something that is, I think, convenient for these people that were once, you would probably say, leftists, maybe, who have decided to grift to the right. And that's something that I find deeply disappointing, but I'm sort of at this point just completely over it, and I think it's tiresome. And I find these people just as dangerous in the long run as any of these far-right people, because at least with far-right people, you know where they stand. You know that, like, for example, Matt Walsh, who is outrageously transphobic, saying awful things about Dylan Mulvaney, who's a delightful trans woman. She just mocks people like that, and I think that's a great way to respond to it. But Matt Walsh is still up on YouTube. Why hasn't YouTube decided he's a hateful bigot and decided to delete his YouTube channel? This is where social media shows its real colors. It's that social media loves controversy, and it loves right-leaning people, mostly because they have. It seems they have the money, and they bring in They have the money, and they bring in lots of money in subscribers and who follow them, who have the misfortune of watching advertisements and stuff. Anyway, I'm going off the track, but I'm just talking in general terms about how over the last 2 or 3 years, particularly since COVID, there's been some opportunists who were pretending to be leftists, and they were pretending to be leftists and saw that there was a lot more money grifting to the right, and they probably had those leanings anyway, so they've seen the opportunity, and so they've gone that way. I'm not saying that Chris Hedges is a grifter, and I'm not saying he's right-leaning. However, I feel like he, through his, possibly, I'm hoping, through his ignorance about social media and what various people like Max Blumenthal and Jimmy Dore and the like have been doing while he's not been paying attention the last 3 years in particular, I'm hoping that he still thinks that they are who he may have thought they were 3 years ago or whatever. I don't know. But he went along to this anti-war in quotes rally that had a lot of, according to Jason Unruh from Maoist Rebel, had lots of very interesting people in the crowd, Ku Klux Klan and far-right groups and literal Nazis in there. There was all kinds of colourful characters apparently in the audience. I don't know if they were or they weren't. That's what he pays more attention to that, Jason Unruh, than I do. So that's what he said, and I watched a few of the speeches and they seemed okay. It's what these people do outside of this event that is problematic. For example, Jackson Hinkle was having a go at black people and the civil rights movement and abolitionists. He was sort of having a bit of a snark at that, and he's transphobic. He's all sorts of problems. I'll just mention this before I go on about this article that Chris Hedges has written called "Lynching the Deplorables," and it's firstly he on his show On Contact, which was on RT before RT was removed from YouTube because it's supposedly Russian propaganda, even though it had a lot of US anti-imperialist people having their own shows, and Chris Hedges was one of them, and he had a show called On Contact. And about 4 years ago, Chris Hedges had a guest on who was two guests, transphobic women, who said the most appalling things on this show. And I think maybe Chris Hedges got some pushback on that transphobic show, and he then had interviewed a trans woman called Pauline Parks, who did a good presentation. That's what he should have done in the first place, because so many on the so-called left have no clue about trans issues, and many on the left don't seem to be interested in learning about it. And then when someone comes along and dumps on trans people, that's just fine, and at best they don't say anything. And we have a lot of that, and I think that is it's a red flag for me, because that's oftentimes transphobia is a pipeline to fascism. I'm not saying that all leftists who don't understand trans issues are going to end up becoming fascist, and I'm not saying that the leftists who have a problem with trans people are going to become fascists, but I'm just saying that oftentimes transphobia is a pipeline to fascism, and that happened during World War II, where Hitler went after the first trans clinic. They destroyed the first trans clinic that ever existed. It would have been 100 years since it was formed had it still been allowed to continue. So that was one of the things that Hitler did, was attacking trans people via this clinic in Berlin. I think it was Berlin. So this is sort of a long history of that, and so when leftists cannot or won't stick up for trans people, particularly at a time where you have tossers like Michael Knowles saying that trans people need to be eradicated, that is really, really unfortunate, to say the least. And I see very little pushback from people on the left. I saw something by Ron Placone yesterday, and I even edited a piece that he did. It was very good, and he was sticking up for trans people. Thank goodness for people like Ron Placone. But there needs to be a lot more people pushing back. And one could even say you should do it for selfish reasons, even if you don't care about trans people, or you don't like them, or whatever the unfortunate position you have as to why you're not speaking out against this very dangerous, violent rhetoric against trans people. At the very least, you should consider that old saying that first they came for this one, then they came for that one. You know how it goes. They start off, and I didn't say anything, then they came for this one, and I didn't say anything, and then they came for me. and there was no one left to speak out for me. Well, this is how it's going to go, and this is how it is going. For example, you only have to see, like, taking away the autonomy of women's over their bodies, banning abortion. That is, you would think that everybody would have been completely outraged about that. There would have been never-ending protests and stuff, but there was a bit of a blip, and then that was that. That is an outrageous thing. That is so. That talk about taking things way back. And part of that is, even you could say, part of this fear, this white replacement theory that the far right has been harping on about. They're worried that white people are going to end up being a minority group. Well, good is all I can say to that. But they're worried, and so they actually want to force women, although they're forcing everybody, not just white women, but they're forcing women to have children, and I think they're hoping that white women will have a lot of children. It's really, really nuts and sad that's where we are. That's part of it. And also, basically just wanting control once again over women, because we live in a patriarchy, and that's what, that's what's been the constant struggle all throughout history, is women being persecuted in all kinds of ways, from, the Inquisition and so forth, taking women's property, making women property themselves, their children property, and so forth. And I think we would, as a society, be going back in that direction if these Christian, in quotes, fascists, who are installing themselves in all levels of government and in the military, etc., the Christian dominionists, if they have their way. Read Chris Hedges' book about that. It would be, people go on about the Taliban. The Taliban has nothing on the Christian fascists and what they would like their society to be. This is just part of the move towards fascism in the United States, and it's spreading around the world to some degree or another. Even here in Australia, we have a number of hate groups here. The Christian lobby, the Australian Christian lobby, is actually on the list of hate groups. Isn't that interesting? Yet they have Christian, in their name. Jesus would be mortified if he knew what people were doing in his name, and it's just ridiculous. Anyway, so there's all these different things I saw yesterday on TikTok. By the way, if you're on TikTok, do join my account, FSF Vega. That's the account name, and it's got 6,000 followers now. So that was in less than a year, whereas I've got like a third of that on YouTube, and I've been on YouTube since 2017. My Faint Signals from Vega account. So that just shows how unfriendly YouTube is to my content. Not that TikTok doesn't have its problems, and it has taken down 2 or 3 of my videos saying that it's inauthentic, even though it's absolutely authentic information. But anyway, this is how it is now. So anyway, there was a woman on TikTok, a black woman on TikTok I saw yesterday, talking about how they're thinking, it seems like they're going to be bringing in Jim Crow laws into Jacksonville. I think, is it Jackson? Or is it Jacksonville in Mississippi? Jacksonville, or Jackson, is a very majority black town, and there's a lot of leftist organizing in that town. So that's what they're thinking about doing there. So as you can see, there's going to be more and more movement towards pushing things back decades, even, many, many, many decades, including, sending women back to the 50s, or sending them back to when women were property and couldn't actually own property, and couldn't work even, and literally were just at home, sort of having children and whatever, and being the, almost like a sexual slave to men. That's patriarchy. That's what a lot of Christian fascists would like to see happening. And if we think that is impossible, well, I think taking away women's autonomy over their body is a great step towards that. It really is. It's outrageous. If that was done in Russia or some other country that was a target of U.S. empire, you'd never hear the end of it. And yet that's happened in the United States, in many, many states, and there'll be more. And they're going to eventually try and remove trans people from public life if they can in the United States. And they're also banning drag from different states. It's unbelievable. Drag has entertained people on TV in so many different ways. Even people have, Mrs. Doubtfire, all these different Tootsie, and all these different shows. Men, Some Like It Hot. Men getting dressed up in drag has been part of Hollywood's thing for I don't know how long. Now all of a sudden they're conflating it with trans people. All very convenient. I mean, basically also implying that, or not implying, stating that trans people are groomers, basically saying they're pedophiles, etc. This is what is happening. American fascism is creeping in. And Ron DeSantis will lead the charge. He's the competent fascist that everybody has been hoping for. That when I say everybody, I mean the Christian fascists probably will have been looking for a competent fascist. I don't think Trump will get back into the White House, because I think the CIA would probably prefer somebody like DeSantis. So anyway, back to Chris Hedges. So I went right off on a tangent there. That's what I do. It's unfortunate, but it's what I do. So Chris Hedges had this On Contact show. He interviewed 2 transphobe women, TERFs as some people like to call them, but I reject that because there's nothing radical or feminist about transphobic women who go on like that. He had Pauline Parks following that, who did a good job, and fortunately did a good job of talking about trans issues. Anyway, but now Chris Hedges has done a article about that January 6th Capitol building attack, and lamenting how the people, the far right people that were there, or the right wing people that were there, how they've been getting unfair treatment or harsh treatment, getting unfair sentences or whatever. Or one Marine got 2 years. He's had 2 years so far in solitary confinement or something, which is not great. But the thing is that if Chris Hedges had been paying attention to, for example, Abby Martin's Empire Files podcast, Abby and Mike did a very clear breakdown of how the January 6th Capitol building attack in 2021, how that was an inside job. Those people were allowed to approach the building unobstructed, and they were allowed to enter the building without much trouble. It was only when it started to get really out of control that there seemed to be pushback, and there was no backup, even though the Capitol Police tried to get backup. That wasn't provided to them, and it got really, really crazy in front of the glass doors. And if anybody has seen the footage, it was very violent, and at one stage it looked like a life and death struggle, where police. And look, I'm not into defending police; they are a real problem, no matter what they are, no matter if they're Capitol Police or whatever. But I'm not enamored about people killing people. I don't care who they are. And it was very violent at these. And there were people being crushed. The police were being crushed in the doorways. Somebody pulled off a police helmet and then started bashing them in the head. It was really, really bad. So I had to stop the video yesterday because we were running out of battery. We were running out of battery, and it was also just about to rain. So I was just going to hopefully pick up the thread of what I was talking about yesterday. And what I was saying was that the Capitol building attack was incredibly violent at some point. I mean, I know that Tucker Carlson is trying to paint it as some sort of nice protest inside a building. But it was actually violent when you watch the footage that was taken at the doorway, which I'll try and locate and slip into this particular segment here. But it was very, very violent, and I've explained a little bit about what that was like. I was going to say, just reiterate that if black people or Muslims or, generally leftists had been sort of approaching the building, and they wouldn't have gotten within a kilometre of that building, and they would have, and if they had gotten to the building, it would have been a lot worse outcomes for prison sentences, but most likely many people would have been killed. They would not have tolerated that from anybody else. I can say that. I can say that with confidence because, you only have to look at how, the police often protect far-right protesters, and they protect. You only have to look at how they allowed Kyle Rittenhouse, after he'd murdered 2 protesters, how they allowed him to sort of just walk off and return home, and they didn't. I think he volunteered himself to the police station the next day. Could you imagine if it was a black person or a Muslim, they would have been dead. They would not have been allowed to live after doing that. It's just how it goes. And the U.S. is, has, I've said this many times, the 14 defining characteristics of fascism, and you get the police are just part of the protecting the oligarchy, protecting the capitalist class, and so I don't know why I don't know why Chris Hedges has decided or thought that the quote-unquote deplorables, the far right, why they needed defending in an essay. I understand that it is, I just feel that the right and far right are doing fine. Thank you very much in fascist-leaning America. I do. And I don't think they need any help from the left. I certainly don't think they need articles written about how, oh, poor me, with the people who were violently attacking a building and trying to bash police's heads in. And I've said I'm not into defending police at all. I think the whole system is dreadful, and there's just it's just an appalling situation for any people that are minority groups, particularly black people, and we all know about the George Floyds of the world, and many different black people have been executed by state police. So I don't need to go into that. Anyway, it started raining, so I might wrap this up. I'm finding this trend that leftists and people who have called themselves leftists, but obviously aren't, like Glenn Greenwald, this trend to defend, like Glenn Greenwald has defended rabid transphobes, like this woman Sriya, who wrote a hideous, hateful, bigoted book about trans people. Glenn Greenwald felt the need to defend that woman. And Matt Taibbi has, he was, I didn't read it, but he seemed to be defending the right of Matt Walsh, an incredible bigot who not only is he incredibly bigoted and attacks trans people in the most hideous way and gets away with it on YouTube, but he's also promoting the idea that he thinks that women, young girls of 14 and onwards, because of throughout history, they've that younger girls have been having children, throughout history, and he wants Western society to return to that, having young girls of 14, children, having children. So that's where Matt Walsh is, and yet trans people are the problem. It's unbelievable that we're at this point where we've got narratives like trans people are groomers and banning drag shows because it's grooming children or I mean, it's the fascism. The fascism is coming in the United States, and it's just awful to behold. And it never stops at those borders either. It's going to leach into other countries, and it has. That's why everybody should be always speaking out for any minority group, any oppressed group throughout the world, because nothing ever stops at that. It's very clear that throughout history, it starts with one minority group, and then it just continues on, and it expands. And that's why I always mention speciesism, because speciesism is just one form of discrimination, just like all the other forms of speciesism equals heterosexism, equals racism, equals sexism, equals classism, equals ableism. They're all forms of the same ignorance. They're all faces of the same ignorance. They all cause violence. And where you have one, you will have all kinds. And that's why we all need to become vegan. And people might go, well, they're non-human animals. They're not even humans. That makes no difference. All that matters is sentience for non-human animals to have the moral importance, to be not used as a thing, not used as a resource. So where we have speciesism, and we have 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals tortured and killed every year for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure, even though we don't need animal products at all to survive, you cannot have a society where this tremendous violence is happening every single day, where every second thousands and thousands of non-human sentient animals are being tortured and killed every second of the day. You can't have that happening in a society and it not affect everything. When we sit down to 3 meals of animals' bodies and secretions and all that goes with that, all the torture and horror that goes with that, it's not possible. So we need to really grasp that point. It's not possible to be non-vegan and think that we're wanting peace on the planet. It's not possible. We can tell ourselves all the stories that it's not relevant, and I'll eventually go vegan when everything else is fixed up, when capitalism ends, or when racism ends, or whatever. We can tell ourselves all these little stories to soothe our conscience, but in the end, when we're responsible for the torture and killing individually of hundreds each year, just individually, we get somebody else to do the executing, the the murder of those non-human animals. When we do that, and anyway, I digress, but I don't digress. It's all relevant. It's all equally important, and it saddens me so much that a lot of people on the left are really, really resistant, even more than just the general public, about even contemplating that issue of becoming vegan. And let's not even get into the tremendous devastation animal agriculture has on the planet. Look at the Dr. Joseph Poore largest study to date in 2018 in the UK, and the results of that, which were adopting a plant-based diet is the most that's a diet free of dairy, eggs, meat, fish, etc., is the single biggest thing one can do to address the climate crisis. But my thing about us exploiting non-human animals is because we don't have the right to do it. They're not our property, they're not our resources. They're sentient animals who are sharing the planet just like we are. We're animals too, sentient animals, and they are as well. So they have the right for us to stop exploiting and enslaving them. Okay, so anyway, back to Chris Hedges. I have great respect for Chris Hedges. I have followed him since 2009 when I first read his essay, which was very shocking. I thought it was incredibly raw, and I was amazed that somebody could be that outspoken, because you just don't hear people being that sort of raw and real about our situation here on the planet. And it was called "This Time We're Taking the Whole Planet with Us." That's the first essay I ever read of his, and I just thought that it was amazing. And I thought, who is this person? And I've been following him ever since. I don't agree with his negative takes on sex workers. He's sort of got a sex negative thing. I don't know if that's something to do with his very, very Christian sort of being, Christian and a pastor and all of that. I don't know what it is, but, he's sort of anti-sex worker, and he's got problems with cross-dressers. He's got problems with trans people. These are all things that he really needs to educate himself on, but I can't see that happening. I think he's had plenty of time to do that. I wish though that people, this sort of apologizing for the far right or the right, and sort of in the name of bringing the right and left together against the oligarchy or whatever, against the global order or whatever you want to call it. It's a bit like sort of swimming with sharks, basically. If those people, if a lot of those people that were at the Capitol building had any sort of power, guess who would be struggling underneath that power? Guess who would be still impoverished or worse, or driven out? They would try to excise LGBT people from public life, just like what is happening now in the United States. And that there would be black people would be in a worse position. There'd be all sorts of awful things more awful things happening on the border. You can guarantee everything that is happening now under both these awful parties that are just one big uni-party in the US. They're just a far right and a right. It would all be, happening still under these people that went to the Capitol building that Chris Hedges is defending and being concerned about. And the same with, any of the right-wingers that Glenn Greenwald keeps defending. It's just sort of like, I find it just very disturbing, and just makes me even more, sort of despairing about it. It's very clear, as I've heard this said before, that the revolution is not going to come from the West. It's not. The revolution is going to come from the global South, and the West, we're a shit show, basically. That's what I think. At this point, just seeing I already thought it was not so great. The left was very tiny about 4 years ago, and now it's even tinier. It's hard to even know who to follow anymore. It really is. And then you see things like, you see Matt Taibbi putting out transphobic stuff. You see, and then sort of Elon Musk sort of seeming to promote him and signal boost him. And I think that's really weird, the whole Twitter files thing, which is so selective, and just this partisan BS. The people like Max Blumenthal, Matt Taibbi, and people like that, have become like reactionary conservatives. I don't know if they're problems with the Democratic Party, and yes, everybody should have problems with the Democratic Party, but it seems to have turned them into full-on reactionary conservatives. It's sad, and but that's how it is, and I just have to accept that that's how it is. And but that's one of the reasons I just as far as YouTube goes, I can't be bothered with YouTube generally speaking, because it's the viewership on here is the suppression, the censorship is shocking. Like I've mentioned, I mean, even since I did the video I did yesterday, I'm attaching to this. Even since yesterday, I've got about 145 new subscribers on TikTok just in one day, and I haven't even done anything. I'm not saying TikTok is great or anything, because they suppress some information about Ukraine when you're actually just presenting even what Lloyd Austin is saying or Stoltenberg. I mean, it's so weird, and yet other things they boost, and you end up getting 100,000 or even 300,000 views. It's very odd, but I mean, at least you get that, whereas YouTube is just appalling. I'm lucky to get 40 people now on every video, and yet I'll get 100,000 on the same video or 300,000 on the same video on TikTok. So I don't know, the whole social media thing to me is just makes me sick, basically. That's why I do stuff offline now, and I try and make a difference in other ways. And this is the other thing, George Galloway. I used to a few years ago I used to follow him, and I thought I didn't know much about him, but he seemed to be very good on a lot of things. And he's become a climate denier. He's a COVID denier, big time. I mean, yes, there's problems with all of that. Because big pharma is a problem. And I won't go into that, but I mean, like, people are actually extremely so conspiratorial. I mean, look at Max Blumenthal. What he was doing on Rockfin was just like, talk about cherry picking and anti-science. Wow. I mean, go and have a look at what he was doing on Rockfin during the real full-on COVID part of it. And one could even question whether he was getting some dark money from Charles Koch, because there was a lot of people getting a lot of funding for putting out anti-COVID narratives. I'm not going to go into that. You can look at some of the videos I've done about all that. But it's like, what else could people possibly do? The sort of the kinds of things that they're willing, the hills they want to die on. Fortunately, Abby Martin and Mike Preisner and Robbie Martin are not transphobic. They are, for trans rights. Thank goodness. And good on Ron Placone. I'm sure there are some others, but I don't know. I'm not really paying that much attention anymore to online and YouTube personalities and stuff. It's sort of does my head in a bit. It's too. I've always sort of said this about, when people they rely on money coming in from YouTube or whatever, that if it's a slow news week or something, they're going to end up getting on different guests that have some questionable views, and because they need to keep having guests, and they also need to keep people excited, this sort of need to create drama and stuff. Like the Vanguard is an example of that. They sort of, when things get a little bit slow, they're looking for fights between different personalities online. This one said this and this one said that, and it's all just, it's like the TMZ, what do they call it? A TMZ-fication or something of the left. That's what it's sort of become in some ways for a number of, and it's not even about, staying on course and looking at real issues and trying to present, wade through the propaganda and present real issues. It's not really even about that anymore. It's sort of like, what can we do to get little whiskers up, and the adrenaline going. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in it. I find it disturbing. There's enough of that online TikTok is a great example of that, and yet there's a lot of great things on TikTok, but YouTube is like that too. It's just sort of people looking for things to, and YouTube tries to create that's what social media does. I mean, Facebook has been caught out, intentionally trying to cause strife and people arguing because it brings in more views and brings in more engagement, and that's what they want. So people being in constant, Twitter has become like an unbelievable, it's just appalling. I can barely, and they've also done some really weird things with it where when somebody you're following replies to somebody, and it doesn't matter who they are, you first see the person you're not following, what they've said, and usually it's something that they've said that's really awful, and then you get the person you're following responding to that. So you're having these sort of tosses sort of shoved in your face, and then the person you're following responding to them, and that's intended to create drama, to create more engagement. They basically want you beside yourself, taking up all your time addressing things. And what for? Because half the time, or most of the time, you're not even seen, because if you've got anything important to say, meaning if you've got something real to say about Ukraine or something like that, they're going to shadow ban you. Or heaven, I think they call it heaven ban, where you think you're being seen. You'll get some limited engagement, but everybody else is not seeing you, or shadow ban where virtually no one is seeing you at all. And you can see that over and over again. I see that over and over again on Twitter. And the only people that see you is the carefully curated group that are following you, and even they don't see what you're saying. I mean, it's a nightmare, really, when you think about it. It's really like being driven out of the town square, but you don't know it. It's like caught in some sort of virtual reality where you think that things are happening, but they're not. And your opinion and your feelings about stuff doesn't matter. I mean, even with the government here, now I'm on a real rave, sorry. Even with the government here, when I ring up about an issue, the Australian government, and I try and speak to the Prime Minister's office, they actually, now I don't know if they've got selective phone messages. They used to just allow people to just talk to the receptionist there in the Prime Minister's office. Now I think it must be the case that, I don't know whether, I hope that a lot of people have rung up, have called them about Julian Assange, but it's like they'll just put you through to a message that then puts you through to some other thing, and then they'll answer the phone and then say, wait a minute, I'll put you back, and they put you back to the office, and they basically just do that so that you'll just give up. So now you can't even ring the Prime Minister's office, and it's almost the case with other ministers now too. So they don't want to know. Once they get in, they don't give a toss what you think. They're all ears when just before the election, and then they get in, and it's even it's sort of like, well, we don't care what you think, and we certainly don't care what you think about our following the U.S. Policy about China. We don't, even if we're going to be used as like Ukraine's being used as a U.S. proxy, which is what Australia's going to be used at. We don't care. We're just going to do what the US wants us to. We don't want to end up like Whitlam, being driven out, being removed by, and the CIA admitted this, being driven out of office. I mean, I don't know. And I'm sorry that this sounds sort of pessimistic and stuff. I don't believe in, I'm not into hopium. I'm not into kind of, let's end on a happy note kind of thing. I mean, I could end on a happy note and just say being in the present moment is all we have, and let's try and enjoy life and be grateful for what we have, and try and be peace ourselves and do what we can with the limited range that we have, or the unlimited, I don't know, depending on how you look at it, to sort of try and address injustice in the world and be kind. Be kind to others, because there needs to be way more kindness in the world. I mean, that can be a happy note that we can all try and do. I try and mention that, being in the present moment. I think it's a lifesaver. That's where peace is. And also be vegan. That's where peace is as well. And we can try and do those things. Oh my, the weather has just suddenly become very still. Anyway, I'm really hoping that Chris Hedges doesn't sort of go on this path now of feeling like he needs to defend the right. I don't think there's anything nefarious in that, meaning I don't think that he is going to start grifting to the right. I don't even think that this is some sort of a grift. I really don't think he's like that at all. But I think that, like I've said, he needs to do research into the people that he seems to think are like, the different sort of like the different left people that he thinks are left, which aren't really left anymore. I think he needs to do research into that. And he also needs to stop with the let's kumbaya with the right. Because, this kumbaya with the right, because it's not going to turn out well for us. Like, it really is like standing in the water with sharks. And when push comes to shove, we're going to be the ones that are going to be sort of rounded up and put in prisons or worse. It really is like that. You only have to see how it's going now. I mean, how is it going? It's not going great, is it? Look at the United States. It's just not going great at all. And DeSantis hasn't even got in yet. And look at how they're rolling back everything way back. It's so going backwards and in a very dangerous way. And so many people are going to, like trans children, there's going to be trans children killing themselves because of all this backward motion that's happening with the trans things and calling trans people groomers and calling, the whole sort of, just being trans is basically being pathologized to the nth degree and, in a really sort of a evil way, being kind of made out to be like it's going to be. It feels like almost like some kind of like, how they were burning witches back in Salem and stuff. It feels like this sort of demonization of trans people at this point. There's some lovely little birds flying around here at the moment, little finches and swallows, and they're just kind of fluttering over just a few feet away from me in the sun. It's very beautiful. Anyway, friends, I was able to leave a comment on Chris Hedges' article on Substack. I joined his. I paid for a yearly subscription for his Substack because he was driven off RT with all the rest of the anti-imperialists when the US banned RT and all of that. And so I subscribed for a year, and I'm just hoping that I was able to leave a comment which I didn't really hold back. I don't believe in holding back. I don't care how much. I try not to put people on pedestals anymore because it just seems like we're at a time in history where, I don't know, people's moral centers seem to be frayed or people seem to be kind of affected by movements towards different things. I don't know. It's sort of like, it's almost like a sickness. I don't know. It's almost like a virus or something is affecting people, and they're just not able to hang on to the center. Do you know what I mean? And I mean that in a sort of, they're not able to kind of just keep their moral compass kind of going forward and being sort of true to that or something. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not saying everybody's like that. I'm not even saying Chris Hedges is like that, but I'm saying it just seems to be just sort of, people seem to be being chipped away or eroded their sort of, and I guess maybe that's just because it's end stage capitalism, because people can feel that, we're destroying the planet and imminent human extinction. I don't know what it is, but something is sort of wrong with how things are going, and that's why it was disturbing to see this article. Is there anything else I need to say about that? Anyway, the last thing I want to say is, besides going vegan, is please stand up for trans people, because this is very, very serious. It's very dangerous, and if you don't know what the issues are, if you don't know anything about trans issues, this is the time to understand it. I would recommend going to see Cat Black has a YouTube channel. Anyway, I better wrap it up because I'm running low on battery again. So thanks for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Viga. Till next time. Bye for now.